To Iraq now, where fierce fighting between security forces and supporters of the Shia leader Muqtada al-Sadr has ended after he threatened to disavow his own movement. Al-Sadr supporters began leaving Baghdad's heavily fortified Green Zone just moments after he called for an end to the violence. A nationwide curfew has now been lifted and calm has returned to the streets of the capital. Baghdad has been rocked by 2 days of fierce battles which broke out after al-Sadr announced he was quitting politics. At least 30 people have died since Monday and 700 have been injured. It's the worst violence the capital has seen in years. There's been political deadlock for a year since al-Sadr's party won the most seats in elections last October.
After my country was a prisoner of corruption, it is now a prisoner of corruption and violence, unfortunately. I wish there were peaceful protests, wrapping coffins on shoulders, something supporters of al-Sadr do, and waving hands with clear hearts that love their country not to use bullets, rocket-propelled grenades and mortars. This is a damned revolution. Regardless who started the shooting and killing, as long as this revolution has turned violent and involved killings, it is no longer a revolution, and I will no longer call it that.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line by Arise Middle East analyst Dr. Saul Zadka. Great to see you, Dr. Zadka. So after 2 days of clashes in Iraq that many feared marked a new phase of political violence, the influential cleric Muqtada al-Sadr has moved to defuse the situation. Is the fighting pretty much over now?
No, not necessarily, but it is quite certain that Muqtada al-Sadr wanted to de-escalate the conflict in the so-called Green Zone of Baghdad because so many of the supporters were killed either by the Iraqi army or by the pro-Iranian militias who were also on the scene. So here I think witness a situation in which his move to withdraw from politics has backfired, and he did not want to see bloodshed on his watch. So that's why he asked his followers to move out of the Green Zone in order to stabilize the situation. However, if this morning there was a situation in which the country was on the brink of a civil war, this has been avoided for now.
Right, sorry about that little break there, Dr. Zadka. What's Muqtada al-Sadr's game plan here? I mean, was this some sort of show of force?
Absolutely, it's a ploy. We know that because he has done it in the past. He has done it twice previously. And what he wanted to do was to assert his influence not only on his own movement, but also on the future of Iraq. He branded himself as the champion of Iraqi nationality. After he was an Iranian ally, he even lived in exile in Iran for 5 years during the American occupation of Iraq. But he decided that he has to lead Iraq from behind through his movement on the ticket of Iraqi nationality, which would not tolerate Iranian involvement in his own country as much as it did not tolerate the American occupation in the past. And Muqtada al-Sadr is the champion of Iraqi nationality, as we can see for the last few years. But he is also the champion of many deprived sections of the Shiite population, although he does enjoy also the support of some Sunnis because he was fighting all the time against unemployment, inflation, corruption, and poverty.
So, Dr. Zadka, given that his supporters are now pulling out, is it possible that some kind of deal has been struck behind the scenes? Although he seems to be one person who tends not to get into backroom talk, or at least that's the impression he tries to give.
Well, he is using force. He is using the almost blind obedience of his followers in order to exert pressure not only on the prime minister, who he regards as an Iranian puppet, but also on other parties of Iraq. What happened was that in October, last October, he emerged as the leader of the biggest party in the Iraqi parliament. He managed to get 74 seats out of 273, almost a third. But he was unable to form a coalition with other parties because he refused to form an alliance with pro-Iranian parties, and he could not reach a majority with the Sunni and the Kurdish parties. So his last ploy, in my opinion, is to trigger new elections which may give him bigger stake of the Iraqi parliament, and it would enable him to form a majority government with the other natural allies. And I think this is what behind his so-called statement of withdrawing from the government. And I think that eventually he may be able to achieve his aim by declaring a new elections, because he was the one, after all, who managed to oust many other Iraqi leaders in the past. So he is capable of doing it. And his show of force in the green zone can make it very, very tangible in his efforts to put a stamp on Iraqi politics, so much so that eventually they will have to succumb to this pressure and he will have his own way.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Zadka, for putting that in much clearer perspective. And Dr. Saul Zadka is Arise Middle East analyst.